Yeah, so one important thing for everyone to notice is that whenever anybody's talking about any cellular process or any life process, anything having to do with the body, anything having to do with that body being, that body awareness, all of that is happening and dissolved in water. It's all happening in a giant bag of water. Its electricity is moving around, completely dissolved in water, and that's the model of life. That's the physical model of life. Everyone's like really interested in like the shape or the structure or the different pipes and hoses and bags and stuff in the physiology, because like that stuff is important, and like the circuitry, the higher level circuitry does work in those ways, because those currents, those veins, those arteries, that vasculature is isolated from the other water as it moves through those tubes, and it has a very specific chemistry when it's in those areas, and the chemistry is only in those areas and it's not in other areas. And so the way that the body, it makes it so that a single body of water has different environments that are still physically connected, but they are discrete environments. So because everything's happening in water, in the body, there's no space in the body. There's no space between one cell and another cell. They're immersed in the same body of water. And if there's there's only under catastrophic circumstances is a compartment created to where water couldn't be shared. I can't even think of anything. So no matter what's going on physiologically, you're looking at what is essentially still chemically one single body of water, and every single reaction is moving through water, happening inside of water. All the electricity, so all the nerve stuff, everything, the entire pattern is in that single body of water. It's physically connected, enveloped, and held in the water primarily. And so no matter how distributed that water is, that kind of helps serve as a baffle, but for the most part, that means that there's this big electrochemical gradient where there's some structural scaffolding of stuff like pulling on things like muscles maybe, but for the most part you have all of that chemistry is fundamentally directing what the body does, how it moves. So all of that chemistry is fundamentally what it's gearing is changing how that water wants to move. The water would naturally move a particular way. Like if you just push somebody, the fluidic inertia, like if everyone stops moving, everyone behaves as if they're just bags of water. Right? So that's that bag of water feeling is dead weight. Like living dead weight. Like if you get too dead, then the water gets stagnant and it gels or it solidifies and it doesn't flow as much. And so what that dead weight is what the water would be doing without the will or without the life in it. The life in it is this electricity in the water that changes how the water is waving, how the water is moving, how the water is behaving. And you can feel it and observe it and interact with it at that fluidic level, which is underneath the structure. The structure has components where this leads to this, leads to this, and it creates these states of consciousness that are dependent on the brain doing its thing, the heart doing its thing, the spleen doing its thing. Everything has to be doing its thing and making the water different there, but not disconnected. but it's under that. It's just one body of water with a shape doing something. Even though some parts of it are chemically different at some times than other parts. All that chemical difference is creating a shape that's doing something. And so that doing something is from within the water itself, because all of the ATP, all of the nerve stuff, all of the muscle, everything's dissolved in water. And so within the water itself, within what has been dissolved into the water, it can suddenly control its shape. Something not the water can control the shape of the water through the exertion of causing these chemical reactions that are dissolved in the body water. By altering how all that electricity moves, you can control the shape of the water. Which is wild. So if you analyze that, enough, I guess. Let's make a system to model this. So this air is drawn down into the water, and then that creates body consciousness. And so this water would be all of existence. With no interference. So the air, the breath of the life is where that runs into the surrounding existence, and this gets stabilized. And as it solidifies, it's like it's like a layer that was alive can sometimes solidify and become dead and kind of become a scaffolding around which the breath survives. So like any amount of air, any amount of breath being dissolved into the water is that feeling of body being, the breath. So it's this type of consciousness being drawn into this type of consciousness creates life. And both types of consciousness are, in some sense, mysterious. Life being the union between these two, which is like, it's not necessarily how big of a structure, how big of a body was created. It's like the life is the actual activity of wanting, of drawing, of being alive, which is like, if you look, like the air doesn't want to go in here. When you pull air underwater, there's a desire for the air wants to go back out. So there's actually this like mechanical they want to separate. So there's these different types of consciousness, like air and water, that just want to separate. So when you go against that natural tendency to be separate, and that desire to breathe, the desire to be alive, is whatever mysterious thing it is that's pulling the air down into the water, pulling it down so deeply that it doesn't just form a bubble, it actually dissolves into the water and becomes part of the water in the metabolism of life. And so like when the air like literally becomes the water, like the oxygen's just like dissolved in the water, and the water and the air, like you have these two like infinitely deep things like kind of reaching into each other in that moment. So if you want to feel that pressure like really directly, and like how all that works out, I really recommend like long snorkeling. I call it hosing. So you do this couple feet of hose, PVC hose, and you feel the dynamic of how the properties of air and water, how they treat each other, and how that impacts the breath, how that impacts life. And you can really get these like you can get a deep understanding of how they treat each other, because you can try and pull air very deep into water with just a couple feet of tubing and really experience the pressure and the resistance and the will that can come along with breathing that deeply into water, which is what happens. Like this is like, oh, I'm breathing a little bit deep in the water, and then if you want to know how deeply life is breathing into the water, it's like that even more. It's like it's dissolving, because it's however deep you did it here, you pull the air in, and then that air gets pulled into you. So it's like double deep. And you can feel, because it's like you have to pull the air down so strongly that then since you're pulling, then the double pull becomes one structure. So you can mechanically feel the pull of the breath that you would feel like, oh, I want to breathe. You can connect that to the movement to breathe, so that the awareness of the breath bridges like two layers of reality, sort of. Yeah, then whatever your as you breathe, it creates that body being, right? Which is, I don't even know how to describe. How would you describe body being? Like this is the idea I have of myself, and then what's the feeling awareness I have of myself? Like, do I have feeling awareness of my neck? Not most of the time. Do I have feeling awareness in my elbow area? Not most of the time, right? So I notice that I have like this diffuse, I don't know if I would want to call it a spotlight, but it's my body being. If I put a spotlight on my body long term, I can increase this map and get it to look more like my anatomical shape. Or I can start to feel anywhere. I can start to try and feel anywhere and get body being, get breath, get life anywhere within my perception, because I know my perception's happening in my body water. Like I know that that anything going on with my eyesight is happening within my neurology, which is happening within my body water, what's happening within my metabolism. So anything that I can perceive of, anything I can think, I know it's able to be, it is breathing, so I can experience breathing it deeper. So you don't necessarily, it's not like more correct to have a body being experience that is shaped like the body, right? It's not incorrect. I think that's what's going on with some of the dysphoria and stuff like that, is people's body being experience is different than what they intellectually understand themselves to be, and there's a freak out about that. It's like, I don't think it's anything to freak out about. It's like totally natural to have a body being experience that's different than what is intellectually understood to be the body. It's like it's literally impossible to match them in functionality. Like, maybe if I was sitting here in deep meditation, could my body being experience, I could feel everything that I intellectually know to be there, and then I'd be like, oh, now I'm embodied. But it's like all this is happening in my body, so it's like, why not just, it doesn't have to be the shape that I think that I am. And it's nearly impossible to do that. The instant I get up and walk, and the shape is going to turn to this like diffuse cloud with hands in it. And if I'm doing movement, or mindfulness or whatever, I'll deploy myself. I'll deploy this body being, this body awareness into like a more useful, shape, an arch, or a curve, or a spiral. Generally, the body being will deploy into those shapes. Why does it deploy into that shape? Intuitively, instinctively, people have forgotten this, but I think this is what people do naturally when they're looking for power, is that the reason that people invented sailing is because they functionally, intuitively move, they exist as sailors. And so you can get your body being to, deploy in roughly the shape of your anatomical self. And then you're in consciousness. So as this moves, it's like the shape or the structure of the body being is going to act like a wing, or an object, or a rough object. And as it moves through consciousness, it's going to get either lift, it might get drag. Everything's going to get drag as it moves through consciousness. So if you're aware, if you have body being, if you have consciousness, if the breath is aware that it's in that heavier consciousness that we would call matter, which includes the space, like that awareness of that as it runs into itself, that's more breathing, just as it happens, as it contacts itself, that focus, that attention to feel this inertia. You don't even have to turn yourself into a wing, but just as this moves, you feel it move through space. And so you feel this area. And as it moves, that movement of the consciousness through consciousness over consciousness brings it more. It is a life. It is the breath. All metabolism is the breath. And then that ends and begins in the beingness of this present moment. Of like, so what is my body being experiencing this present moment? Like, what is the experience of my life? And it's just what this isn't like a magical, mystical question. It's like, how do you feel your hand? It doesn't have to feel all 5 fingers. Maybe the 5 fingers are helping you feel the space around the hand. But then whatever you're feeling around the hand, that you're healing through the hand, is the body being experience of the hand. And so this model that you get from snorkeling or whatever is also basically a really good model for what's going on. So this is like all the vibrations, this is all the nerve impulses, the metabolism of the body is happening here. So it's waving, it's moving. And the only way it's waving, it's moving is because it's a surface. So it's created a surface. Like this is the main surface, and then life has created another surface. And that surface, both surfaces are being moved by this awareness. And so this embodied awareness, this denser awareness, is aware of, around, and enveloping this higher awareness. When it's in the context of life, normally this higher awareness is higher than this lower awareness, but in the context of life, that inverts. And with life, it's not, water's not being drawn up into the air, air is being drawn into the water. And so the pattern reverts, where the higher awareness is enveloped or surrounded by the lower awareness. So this is like the heavenly knowledge is enveloped or inside of hell, inside of the lower awareness. In the context of life, it's not this way when you die. When you die, you see that the heavenly realm is like escaped or free or above or infinitely transcended the lower. But while alive, it's totally encapsulated inside of as the mechanics. But then even that, this awareness then sees this is the encapsulating awareness, right? So the encapsulating awareness, the seeing which sees the seeing, like this awareness is the objects that it's the energy of the objects. What is aware of the perception? What's enveloping the what is the awareness that's around all experienceable phenomenon? Is this awareness, is this lower awareness. That's the seeing. Is the water, is this body water, this heavier, denser, fluidic substance, this living substance that's is like living, like the air is alive. You can it's all of matter. It's all of matter. The way that I think science has proven that all of matter is behaving wave-like. It's a fluid with kind of standing waves in it. But so that awareness is seeing the ultimate pattern, and it's simultaneously seeing, it sees both. It knows both. But this pattern here is the ego. So it's the seeing thought self. It doesn't see both. Its very existence is not seeing. This thing sees basically with eyeballs. So it's all the like, oh, I see objects. And this is I see seeing. this awareness right here is the only thing that could see this eyeball. Which is creating vision, it's creating objects within the metabolism, within the life. So this thing is seeing that life. And this is life created with like some desire to pull the air down inside of it against the pressure. And this surface is not alive in the same way, because it's that surface is there because the water has pulled away from the air. So this is like the transcendent surface of death, and then this surface is here because the air or something, some desire, some love between the higher and the lower has pulled the air down into the water, creating life. And so this guy here that you can kind of like spin or twist or move or sense that it's in being or in awareness, that the awareness is real, that it's palpable, that it's a substance that's like heavy enough and thick enough and real enough and dense enough to contain matter, right? Like it's like from the perspective of the self looking out, you're looking at something like the ether that's around or giving rise to or connected to all phenomenon, especially all electrical phenomenon. And so it can move in such a way that you can it'll drag on you, can feel it. You can feel it, and that the feeling of the awareness increases the awareness. So you can have these two interact. You can, from this perspective, you can just give yourself attention, focus, right? You just bring I'm just present here. That makes it so that all this water here is kind of pressing into you. If you want to be there, if you want to go somewhere, you can send a wave, or send the awareness, send the consciousness in the direction of the body, and the body can feel that. And so it starts to develop a concept or an understanding or an intuition or an idea about the awareness outside of itself, the awareness of how this behaves, even though that's an incomprehensible concept, like how that which sees the seeing has inertia to it, has a physical property to it, and it is intimately tied to the water of the body, moves like it, behaves like it. Possibly, I think is it, as much as things are things. Water is consciousness, is this lower consciousness, and then air is that higher consciousness. And there's a lot that could get, I mean, I think that's the most important things. I think that's like the summary. $43. I missed 343. 444. Anyway. So that's a summary of my model of the universe, a grand unification theory, a unifying theory of cognition, etc., etc. I would like to enter this into the science fair.